Hi, everybody. Welcome to Primary Sources. Thanks so much for joining in today. We have a terrific guest. I'm very excited. So let's definitely get underway and like just quickly share. There we go. Well, thanks again for joining. As creatives, we are always working, constantly working to hone our talents and our skills in whatever discipline or for art form that we work in, that we work to develop. And it's an ongoing process. We strive to bring our best game forward in whatever it is we're doing, whatever project. We're always moving forward towards a heightened approach to our skills and talents and the unique experiences, talents, and knowledge that we bring to what we do is a unique combination of skills, all of these coming together that we've cultivated. We could sort of align this in the term of ability, or our competence in an activity or occupation because of what we've done to hone our skills, trainings, and other qualifications. But this results sometimes in a need for transition when uh, we are taking on these abilities and taking them out into the wider world. There can be challenges. Sometimes in the creative workspace or in any workspace, really, communication may not be clear, or a project might be suffering from a range of issues, from um, lack of clarity in the final objective, or challenges technologically or creatively or financially. There are a whole range of issues that present themselves that could challenge the completion of a project. So we then need to learn to transition sometimes. This can change from one position or state or concept to another. It's that transition of uh, time of sudden unprepared modulation. I think in light of our current circumstances, we can all relate to this idea of transition. And yet, when we think about it, transition is all around us. It's a standard part of nature. The lessons are apparent and evident every day in the impact of transition, the process of transition. And it teaches us lessons that if we look and pay attention, we can apply these. And in that ability, it is really about learning to adapt, to make suitable and to adjust oneself or modify to the varying conditions or environments fittingly. So to adapt within changing conditions or climates, perhaps it might be adapting in the direction we may take for a project or where a project may go in, or it might be applying some level of flexibility to the course ahead and what we might need to do to bend a little bit and yet still get the same final result that we're looking towards, or adjusting the course of a project with a bit of creativity, and applying maybe a little different approach to it or a different skill to it. And that is really the art of adaptability, the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions and for a new use or a new purpose. And when we apply this creatively, starting with perhaps a few minor but fresh adjustments, and we apply this adaptability when applied, can bring about the necessary changes. Sometimes easy, sometimes maybe not that easy, but applying this flexibility will bring about the changes that will ultimately bring us to the realization of a brighter final outcome. And today, our guest on Primary Sources is quite familiar with creative adaptability. She has an incredible array of work under her belt as a production manager, associate producer, and producer on a wide range of topics, from some of our most landmark documentaries to feature length and short animated films, multi-award winning, as well as working with a wide range of professional talent and in studio and independent circumstances. So she's a very adaptable with her background. And it is my great pleasure to welcome a very dear friend, Connie Thompson, the extraordinary Connie Thompson, associate producer and producer, now currently in development at Warner Animation Group. Connie, it is such a joy to have you here.
It's so great to be here with you, Mindy. It's great to see you and connect again and to be here with everybody on this great format you have. I'm excited.
It's been a lot of fun. And part of the big joy of it is getting an opportunity to sit down quietly and converse. One of my favorite things that we don't get to do these days as much, but we can through this medium. So I'm grateful. So, it's been said, to paraphrase Darwin here a little bit, that it's not the strongest of the species that survives necessarily, nor the most intelligent within the creative world or the most creative in the creative world, but the one who's most adaptable to change. When we think about it, our only real constant in this world is change. And as someone who has had a lot of transition and worked in so many different realms and fields in your career, you're the perfect candidate for this particular topic. Talk a little bit about how how you've applied creative adaptability to your career, just as an overview. We're going to dial in a little bit, but as an overview.
Yeah, I think it has been sort of a theme of my career has been adaptability. I started in TV animation, and then I moved to interactive games, and then I went into feature animation, and then had a stint over at the Disney live action studio working on documentaries, both fully live action and about animation, and then back into feature animation and all forms, stop motion, traditional 2D animation, and CG animation. So I feel like there's been a lot of transition and a lot of different kinds of companies in my career, and learning to adapt to all those situations and making sure that my skills were what they needed to be in order to support the teams I was working for and with, and eventually for me. Adaptability was a big, major quality that I wanted to cultivate, and I did.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about when you're making some of those early transitions. When you started, did you have this idea that you wanted to work in a variety of forums, or was it because of the work you were doing, suddenly, this is interesting, I've mastered it, now I want to move on to some new area?
Yeah, mostly the latter. I think when I started, I was in TV animation, and I started as a production assistant down at the bottom of the ladder. And I started working with technical directors and seeing what they were doing. And it was when in animation, when digital ink and paint and compositing systems were just starting to arrive. So all of that back end of the process was done on computers for the first time. And I worked for a small television studio that was doing that work. And what the TDs were doing were working with the software that company had proprietarily developed for themselves to do that inking and painting and compositing. And I thought that sounded great, and I wanted to do it. I was like, because they got to, own their own show or their own sequence in a show, and be very technical and work with the art and kind of see how it all came together. And they were kind of lone wolves. They just took their work and they would do it. And they were so competent, and it just looked like something I wanted to do. And I talked to my boss at the time. I was a production assistant. And she sat me down and she said, you can do that. You can do anything you want to do. You could learn to use this software and become a TD. Now, technology changes very rapidly, and that software is going to change, and those jobs are going to go away. and you'll have to keep learning the new software. She goes, but if you focus on production management principles and learning those, they will apply to any job that you will ever want to do. And you won't have to constantly keep, retraining in a specific piece of software or something like that. And I didn't like her answer at all. I didn't see myself as a manager. I didn't want to be a management person. I wanted to be more on the artistic or the making things side. So I took her advice, but I kind of took it kicking and screaming. But worked my way up through the production management side of things, from PA to coordinator to production supervisor, and eventually, when I was at Disney, a production manager and associate producer, and now I'm producing. And I can't say that every step of the way was easy or something that I didn't, that I enjoyed 100%. But I kept learning things along the way and being able to adapt what I was doing and how I worked with the creative teams I was working with, that made it more enjoyable and kept me going, to the point where when you start to be a production manager and an associate producer on the production management track, that exists at every studio, whether it's TV or animation or live action or anything. It becomes more creative and more enjoyable as you go up through those ranks. So I feel like I got to the place that I kind of had that desire to be part of the team that was making something. And the honest truth is, even as a PA, you're part of the team that is making something. So there was always enjoyment, no matter what step of the ladder I was on, being part of that creative team, making something that was going to go out into the world and be enjoyed by people.
Well, throughout the various steps of your career thus far, can you give us an example of, making the transition from feature animation into stop motion animation, or going into live action or documentary work? Those are major leaps, and you have people who will stay focused only on one track all throughout their careers. So talk a little bit about how what adjustments you may have had to make, any learning curves, any challenges you had to overcome.
Oh, huge learning curves. And really getting those opportunities were through the relationships that I was building in the jobs I was doing. So at Disney, I started working with a producer named Don Hahn, who is just one of the preeminent producers in all of animation history. And learning from him, and that's where the opportunity to work in documentary form as well as in stop motion came from. And but the key to those opportunities are the relationships, and making sure that you're doing the best job you can do in the role you have. That's the kind of performance that opens up opportunities, new opportunities, fresh opportunities moving forward. So I would say externally, it's making sure you're doing the best job possible in the role you already have. That's the way to get to the next role. But internally, the leaps were big and scary and terrifying. And I know that, when I was contemplating those, getting those opportunities and contemplating taking them, and how is this going to work? I've never worked in stop motion before. I've never worked in documentary before. That takes a little bit of the willingness to be uncomfortable in a job, the willingness to take some risks, and also the willingness to say when you don't know something. So, it's human nature to hide it and say, I got this, and then kind of try to figure your way through it and make mistakes and cover them up. But it's such a more powerful position to admit that you don't know something, and let the people around you who you've built relationships with, coming up, help you. Then you really are a team. You're supporting each other with your strengths. You're supporting people in your team, and then your team is supporting you with your weaknesses. And then it builds trust as well, because if you're always covering up that I don't know something or I made a mistake, people start to notice that you can't cover that, and they're like, she doesn't always say the truth. She doesn't always say when she needs help. She doesn't always admit when, you got this? Yeah, I got it. Well, I really don't got it. So admitting that you don't have it, or you need help this first time, or where's the resource I should go to make sure that I don't screw this up, then people know you're going to say the real situation, whether it makes you look knowledgeable or not. And I think that makes for production teams that trust each other and are able to get through any hurdles and new situations because they support each other.
Well, trust is such a big thing. I'm glad you've touched on that. In a couple of areas I do want to go down is talking about people skills and cultivating strong people skills and cultivating community and your resources, your human connections, how important that is throughout your career, but certainly on a production, but also throughout your career.
Oh yeah, it's so funny because it's all relationships, right? You hear that from being a little kid. It's all in who you know and being in the right place at the right time. But I can't tell you, those two things are so true. And they sound trite, but they're not, because in practice, it's all in who you know. That's not something that, oh, I just don't know those people, so I'm out of luck. Who you know is the relationships that you build along the way. And if you are truthful and a good team member and supportive of the people you meet at the bottom, those become the people that you support and support you on your way up and at the very top. And they want to introduce you to people that that can help you. They want, and they want to, good people want to introduce good people to other people. It just becomes a networking truth when you've demonstrated that you're a good team member. So it's I always thought when I was little that business people were like men with hats and briefcases, and I don't know what they do. What's in the briefcase? I don't know. But business really is about relationships. It's all about relationships, and it's all about relationship building. And that's it in a professional sense, not in a personal sense, but in a professional way, which means being truthful at work, doing the best job you know how, asking good questions, admitting when you don't know. Those are the kinds of qualities that make you trustworthy and a good person to work with. Oh, being positive at work, working harder than you think you have to, working harder than those around you. These are the qualities that make you a team member people want to work with. And that's what opens up opportunities.
Yeah. First one on the set, last one to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're excited and it resonates. There's an energy when you get the right combination of people together. Talk a little bit about, on some of your various projects, let's go into staffing and how choices you make based on the project, how you proceed. If you do open calls for material, are you working off of references? Talk a little, and I know that varies from project to project, and let's also explore that a little bit too.
It varies from project to project and from week to week sometimes, and from company to company. But the truth is, one of the biggest constants in my career has been the people that I work with. So the artists that I know and have relationships with, that I and I keep those relationships. I keep in touch with people, whether I'm using them on a certain project or not, because I know that someday there's going to be a perfect role for that person, and I want to work with them again because we enjoyed working together before. And I'm constantly looking for new people. So, before COVID, when we could see each other, I was going to CTN every year. I went to Lightbox. I went to the graduate shows at CalArts and Art Center, as well as the USC Animation School. and have been able to find new talent who I know instantly, even before they graduate, that I am going to be able to work with those people. If not tomorrow, then soon. They're people I want in my Rolodex and I want to keep in touch with and have a relationship with. And sometimes those roles are a freelance gig for a few weeks or a few months. And sometimes they're a more permanent art department role or editorial role or story artist role. So that's, I'm constantly looking for new artists and trying to meet new people. There's also a couple organizations that we've been working with lately for the last couple of years. One is Black Women Animate.
Mm-hmm.
And women in animation, of course, have been around for ever. They're a great organization. Just to open up the scope of the kinds of artists and production people that we're looking for, make it more inclusive and more diverse, is a big push for us nowadays. We're always looking for new people that we may not have found before at Art Center or USC. But they went to a smaller school and they have the skills and they're the kind of person we want to bring into the team.
And let's talk a little bit about skills and what you look for, what stands out, best practices in terms of getting their work to you in whatever forum.
Yeah. So I would say there are fundamentals that we look for in every portfolio. And those can be, it depends on the artist, but if it's a story artist or a visual development artist, it's good drawing skills. If it's an editor, we look at the reel and see what kinds of work they've done before, what kind of an editor they are. If it's a production person, it's really about communication and openness, all the qualities I've been talking about that served me on my way up. Willingness to jump in no matter what the day brings, whether it's below your role or exactly your job description or above. Because a lot of times there's opportunities to work above your job description, which leads you to the opportunities once those roles open up for promotion. So, so the fundamentals of drawing, across the board for artists is what we're looking for. Good drawing skills, good storytelling, whether that's visual development, like a still image or storyboards. We're looking for somebody who can communicate emotion with a drawing. Like, is this a funny moment? And I want to laugh out loud. If it's funny, that drawing should make me laugh.
Yeah.
If it's a sad or emotional moment, I want to be able to look at that artwork or look at those boards and know what that character is feeling. That's a tall order, but if you can push yourself to make sure that the drawings you're doing are communicating emotion, whether it's happiness or some humor or sadness or tragedy or fear, those are the things we really look for, because I'm working in development now. So I'm working on putting presentations together with a full team, story artists, visual development, editors. A presentation that in less than 25 minutes sells the concept of this movie. So every piece of artwork that we show in that Greenlight presentation has to sell the emotion or the humor or both, usually both, of this project, so that they cannot say no to it. Before the end of those 20 or 25 minutes, the executives have to be going, Greenlight that, I want that movie. So it's really important that every piece of artwork does that job, does that heavy lifting. This is a tall order for your portfolios, but it is something that grabs my attention when I'm looking at work. Like, I laughed out loud at that drawing, or I can tell what that character is feeling. Those are the things that really grab my attention.
Well, and now that you are in development, has it shifted how you are looking for talent? And has it shifted? Have you adapted to the differences for development versus full-on production. I mean, if you've previously worked on projects that were greenlit and underway, and
Yes.
you needed those artists right away, but now in development, how have you adapted to that transition?
There is adaptation. It's very slight, but critical to understand if you're an artist looking for opportunities in development. But it's all the same people. It's the same qualities of artwork I'm looking for. It's the same roles: story artists, visual development, character designers, people that do big sweeping epic concept paintings, editors, and production people. All the same things I'm looking for. It's just we have such a small budget before the movie's greenlit, so I have tiny bits of money to get each project up to the green light. So in many cases, if you are a very specific artist and have a specific drawing style, and I will be looking for you to match you with the project that your drawing style really complement. They complement each other. But because it's so specific, it may only mean that this is a freelance position for a few weeks or a few months at the most. For longer term work in development, again, we have tiny bits of money, so I have a very tiny crew, and I'm looking for people who are a little more versatile, who can draw Bugs Bunny, but also draw an original character that no one's ever seen before, can draw very cartoony, but also a little more realistic, can do broad comedy, but also do artwork that really communicates epic, cinematic, dramatic movie moments. So those are the people who are more versatile, little jack of all trades. So they do Photoshop, they do character design, they do world paintings. They can also do a little bit of After Effects or any of the various tools to bring a little bit of movement to the artwork. Those are the people we're looking for, and get a little bit of a longer term role in development because they're so versatile. They can touch everything we do. And so they get longer time periods.
It's, I think, really key for artists as they're planning their portfolios to target, to stay constantly freshening their portfolio with and thinking about who they're submitting it to and what they would be looking for, which is interesting insight for development. When you keeping your magic Rolodex of artists at hand, are you starting with the project first, or when you see an artist's work, I want to use them on something, but what comes first?
Oh, both of those things. It's yeah, it's the chicken before the egg and the egg before the chicken. So a lot of times we'll just see an artist and we'll just all love this artist, and we're like, I don't know what we're going to use them on, but something.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we have projects that are looking for specific things, like this is a project with a lot of cars, cool cars, so we're looking for people who love to draw cool cars, or this is a project with epic dragons in it or something, and so we're looking for a specific thing that an artist just loves doing. It's their favorite thing to do. And then we find them and hire them. We were working on a project, a very specific project, and we were going through CTN and looking at the artist booths, and somebody was doing the artwork that we needed. Like, so we were just like, can I have your card, please? Yeah, and we hired them to do several weeks of each of the characters, because they were in love with the property that we just happened to be developing, and it was kind of a match made in heaven. That's always fun to do. But we're also looking for people, we just love their work. We don't know where we're going to use them, and sometimes we will test somebody, just like, hey, come do some artwork for us on a variety of projects, and let's see what you can do, because especially with kids who are straight out of school, their portfolio, their assignments they got in school may not show everything they can do. So it's fun to have them in for a few weeks, have them touch 3 or 4 projects and see what they can do, and then kind of, have a feel for what it's like to work with them.
A little bit of a tryout in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's good insight for particularly for students who are trying to get their first step into the waters of production and to get a feel for where their talents can plug in. Beyond festivals and events and seeing things now today online, what do you think of the global approach that's happening with animation today? Do you guys does everyone have to be in the Los Angeles area, or are you working
We're,
remotely?
yeah, we're all working remotely right now. But now more than ever, but even before we all started working from home, I would say we're using artists from all over the world. And it gets interesting when you're trying to set a meeting time. Sometimes a little bit earlier, a little bit later than you want it to be. But yeah, we want to work with the right artist for the right project. So many times we're working with people in countries around the globe, and that's a joy because it just opens up the possibilities of who can touch a project so much more than just hiring people in LA. I would say on a production that might be slightly more challenging, but I certainly know productions that have done that, who have story teams that are all working remotely from home, from anywhere in the world, and sending their work in. And the same thing for visual development. That really works. I would say if you're in editorial, it's a little bit trickier because those teams need to be localized with the producer and the director, and they need to have day in and day out contact. And that's a little bit tougher. That needs to be wherever the production is, that needs to be a hub that those people are physically together. And that's been tough during this time.
Well, let's talk a little bit about when in your prior work you've focused typically, I know your work at Higher Ground or Stone Circle rather, was diversified. You were doing a number of projects there at various times and at various levels of production steps in the process. But now today you are more focused on I would assume a wide range of things. Some may make it, some may not. Talk about some of the transitions you've had to make in stepping into that kind of a different approach to producing.
Yeah. What's great about being at Warner Brothers is there's so much in-house owned IP at Warner Brothers. There's Looney Tunes, Hanna-Barbera. There's the whole DC, comic book universe with, hundreds of amazing characters. And we're working with the Seuss Foundation on some new Dr. Seuss projects. So there's just this wealth of IP that is well known around the world that we get to tap into. And it really is our mandate to develop into feature films. And many of these characters have only been known in short form for the decades on television or playing before movies. So to be able to develop them into full-length features is an honor. It's intimidating because there's so much beautiful work that has gone before. But it's a wealth of material. So that's been the challenge is how do we take these very well-known and beloved properties and characters and develop them into a movie that's relevant for audiences today without losing what was great about them, the reason they're famous, the reason we all love these characters and we love these stories. So it's a challenge. It's a huge responsibility. But it's also an honor, and it's just been a very fun thing to be able to do, busy thing to be able to do, and to find artists who can work in those worlds. So that's been the challenge in this new job, and I've been doing it for 3.5 years now, and I love it. And we have 3 movies in production now. I have a list of 35 things in development that we're working on. And it's busy and great and really, really fun. And we're also working on some original ideas. So it's not all existing IPs. So there's existing, original ideas that are being developed as well, which is
Now,
great.
talk a little bit about, are you handing those off to a creative team that you've pulled together and then back onto the development stovetop to keep up multiple thoughts going? Do you get to see the process all the way through? Are you shepherding things along the way?
A little bit of both. Mostly, we're working with a director and a writer before greenlight to develop this presentation. Sometimes there's a producer that will go with the show as well that I'm partnering with. Or close to the green light, we start talking to producer candidates that we will hand the project off to, and they will do pre-production and production and post. And then, yeah, because where development is here and a part of the genesis of these ideas, there are times when we will go to screenings and give notes on a movie that's in production, or help more substantially with a presentation or something that the show reaches out for us to contribute to. So we're like a full service shop where whatever kind of support the shows need. I mean, we are driving them pre-greenlight with our creative partners of the director and writer and sometimes producer. And then once we hand it off, we are always there, if extra hands, are needed. And that happens at every animation studio I've ever been at. There's these all hands on deck times when the movies are like, everybody come look at this movie. Here's what we need, and we all just jump in where needed. So it's fun because it's a bit of both, and I love all of it. So it's a great role. I really like it.
It strikes me that you've really found your familiar waters where you are able to apply the diversity of your background to such a wide range of projects. If something needs to have a more, might relay itself better in stop motion versus CG or traditional animation, or even, are you also doing, is it strictly animated projects, or are you stepping into live action on some?
Well, that's a great question. We have both hybrid live action, a mixture of live action and animated projects. One that's two that are in production now, Space Jam 2, which is stars the live action LeBron James, so cool. And all the Looney Tunes characters that you know and love in full glorious animation, as well as Tom and Jerry, which is another hybrid, which is Tom and Jerry in the live action world. Really cute, charming story. And these characters are beloved around the world, so it's really fun to see them come to life again. So that's a combination of live action and animation. And then we also have many fully animated movies that are in production and development. So we get to do both, and we're looking at any form. Space Jam 2 has 2D animation as well as CG animation in it, and we talk about stop motion all the time. There's a couple projects now that may want some stop motion or to be stop motion, and well, that would be wonderful. It's a special place in my heart for a stop motion animated movie.
Well, and it's exciting that these worlds are blending, especially. How do you, because of that, and that's always been the quandary for me as a creative, you focus so much on one particular your primary talent and role and expertise and skill and experience, but it seems the industry is shifting more to, as you said, a lot more hybrid projects. And where can artists, what can they do to remain relevant in a multifaceted world of production these days? Adaptability has been sort of our theme today, and I think that is something to keep your mind open to, different kinds of projects. But I also want to underline the value of the traditional animation skills. And people who have come up through the ranks, have learned it in school, have done it at studios where
they know the animation fundamentals and are very strong in it and can apply it to any kind of movie that they work on. Kind of like my boss said to me, you learn the production management fundamentals, the principles, and you can apply it to any kind of movie that you work on or any kind of project, let alone, it could be TV, it could be a book project, it could be a feature film. All of them will take those fundamentals. And I think that's even more true today than it ever has been, not less true. You know, traditional feature animation, quality animation principles of squash and stretch and good drawing, good draftsmanship, color theory, all these things, cinematography, all the things that have made animated movies great and beloved through, the 100 years of making them are more true now than they ever were before. And nobody does it better than our little animation community. And it's needed now more than ever. I mean, the explosion of companies that want to be in the animation business is bigger than ever, extraordinary. And your skills are needed. So keep honing those skills, be the best artist you can be, and then make sure people know what you can do, show people what you can do. And it's needed. It's needed now more than ever.
Well, you bring up a great point. As a musician, I was always told you got to know the rules before you can break the rules. So it was hours and hours woodshedding the scales and getting getting it down so that you knew to improvise beyond that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that applies across all art forms. With all that you have done, is there anything that any turns in your career that you wish you would have done a little differently, or that you any personalities or circumstances where you thought, oh, what was I thinking? How do I navigate around this? How do I spin this a little bit so it's can keep me on course? Did you ever feel you got off track at all, or?
That is such an interesting question. And I would say that the most important thing is that, yes, I mean, like any endeavor in life, whether just getting up in the morning, there's always going to be days that are bumpier than others. And that's true about any career, any kind of thing that you try to do in life. And I have certainly had those where, is this really happening? Like, why is this happening? And I would say that I don't regret them. I don't regret any of those decisions or heading down those roads, because often you learn more from the hard situations than you do from the ones that are easy. Yeah. I've learned great things from both. I far prefer it when it goes well and the team is working well together and there's a lot of trust, and you make movie after movie together, and it's a joy. But that is not always what happens, and work styles differ, and priorities differ. Most animation studios today are allied with a large multinational corporation, and those come with challenges, and they come with changes and priorities that on the filmmaking level may not make sense to us ever, because we're not included in those decisions, but they will affect our projects like profoundly, whether it's companies merging with other companies, canceling projects, scaling projects down, changing the release date of a project, or laying people off altogether. Those things have all happened in my career as well. And they're a truth of the industry. It just is the way. We wouldn't have movies if these big corporations didn't want to be in that business. So we're grateful for it. They're our parent companies, and they're the reason we get to do this thing that we love so much. But it does come with things that won't make sense. Decisions that won't make sense to us in our day-to-day trying to make a movie.
Yeah.
But you just roll with it. You just keep doing the best job you can do day in and day out. Be good and support the people in your team. You know, and you get through it. And these movies get made and they go out into the world and they bless a lot of people. I mean, now more than ever, we just had this where we were finishing the Scooby-Doo movie.
Yeah.
Came out in May, you know, when the world was shutting down in March. And the decision to release that, you know, on streaming instead of in theaters, because theaters were all closed, it felt really good because it meant families could enjoy something new at home together after being at home together for a couple of months.
Mhm.
And, you know, it was weird because we didn't have the same kind of box office like feedback, like, you know, how many people went and, you know, was that a big hit? It was harder to get those metrics, but we could tell by the length of time that it stayed in the, you know, top 10 on streaming services that people were getting to see it, and it was bringing a lot of joy to people. And
Well, another great example of adaptability and
yeah,
where this forum is easily taking us as one of the few forums that's thriving actually in this current circumstance.
absolutely.
You brought up a really great point earlier. I'm always telling students and young folks getting into the industry to sometimes to not fear those circumstances if there are challenges or you're learning, oh, maybe this isn't what I want to be doing. I
Mhm.
think that's equally important to make that discovery. It answers any lingering questions of, oh, I should have tried this. And when you realize, I'm not very well suited for that. So those are equally important discoveries because they get you turned around and on course a little more direct.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's so true.
So that's an inherent part of this industry and nothing to be fearing, just be prepared for it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think based on your point, bringing up good people skills and a positive attitude is always helpful. And as all things go in production, this too shall pass. You'll move on to a new show or a new production always. Talk a little bit about the mentors you've had in your career and some of the best advice you've received or support or instances where their presence or their advice has made a difference for you.
Oh yeah, I think mentorship is key, and the best of those relationships are informal. I mean, it just happens sort of naturally through your work life. Um, and it comes through hard, you know, just performing within your role, you know, keeping your head down, working hard, doing the best job you personally can do, you know, regardless of, you know, external factors. And there will be people that you come into contact with that recognize that, who say you're capable of doing more than you're doing right now. Or, you know, if you ever have any questions, you know, come find me and I'll answer them for you. And it just gets you to that next level. Um, those relationships are key. You can look back at the time, they feel so natural and sort of like this is just an outcome of coming to work every day and doing a good job. But as you look back, you realize, well, that led me to that other thing, and that led me to the other thing. And without that relationship and that interaction, I wouldn't be where I am today. And it doesn't take a lot of those. I think I can count on one hand how many relationships I've had like that have been very influential and very beneficial to my growth. Yeah, you're nodding because you have the same sort of thing. And so it's not like you need a million people to believe in you. You know, it really is those a few key times when somebody has said something or, you know, hired you, said, you're capable of more. I'd like you to come work with me. Or, um, you know, how are we going to get this done? Well, I'm going to promote you and now you're going to get it done. You know, like those are the things that happen that make a big difference.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it's finding someone who sees beyond what you see in
yeah,
yourself,
yeah,
see your capabilities, see your you know, and has that sense of, oh, you can be doing it, that belief in you that
yeah.
You may not see it. It's the too close to the canvas thing where
Yeah,
I see it as clearly, but they do. And
they do. And often it does take someone else to have that view of us that we don't even have of ourselves. And uh, because I'm talking a lot about like in your job, stay focused, keep your head down, work hard. That means you're kind of, I'm
yeah,
keeping, you're
oh,
just working away every day, every day, every day, one day at a time. I'm doing
yeah,
the best job I can. But it takes those people who see you every day doing that work, doing that job, being that consistent, who say, yeah, I like the way you do that, and I want you to be on my team. And then you get opportunities for growth from those people. And this is kind of an opportunity to talk a little bit about work style
yeah,
too, because not everybody's work style matches each other, right? And I've found myself in situations where I'm in a group where my work style and management style does not work. And it's easy to feel bad about that, like I'm not as good, like this I am failing, or I have deficiencies. And over years I've learned it's not true. uh, my work style is not deficient, it's just different. And if you find yourself in that team, do the best job you can. But once those differences are revealed, it might be time to move on and find a team that your work style and your priorities match with better. Because once you find that team where you mesh well with them and they mesh well with you, then success is natural. It isn't like swimming upstream all the time. Where if you just don't mesh with the person that you're working for or the team that you're working with, it can feel like a struggle every day. Um, and just remove yourself from it. It's easier said than done because we all need a job and we need a paycheck. But just know that I will find my place where I fit with the people. And once you find that, everything will fall into place. And there is that spot for you. It might take a while to find, and you might find it and then go to the next opportunity and find yourself in a not quite a good fit again, and then have to figure that out. But don't give up. It's not that you're deficient necessarily. You may have things you need to learn. I'm not saying that you don't, but it might just be work style. It might just be fit. And it's in just because we're not a good fit with everyone on the planet doesn't mean we're not good at what we do and we don't have a spot somewhere. Just keep looking for it.
yeah. And I think too, you get into a circumstance where you some elements may click well, but other facets, personality clashes, that sort of thing may happen. Or you are, as you said, so focused on your work, and we aren't necessarily reading the road signs of, oh, a little bit of problems ahead, or
Yeah.
how to manage, work your way through those, or there's always going to be inherent conflict when you've got a group of people working towards a common goal. I always joke about the steering the ship and trying to get that giant field of several hundred people moving in the same focused direction as herding cats.
Yes.
And let's talk about some of those challenges and rewards of getting large groups of people focused on one singular goal.
Mm-hmm.
Communication,
Yeah.
like minds, people really putting their effort towards that, strong leadership. What are some of the
Mm-hmm.
key core elements of making that happen?
Yeah, I think the things we've been talking about, communication is number one. If your team doesn't know what the goals are, they can't help you meet them. If you don't know what your boss's goals are, you can't support them in getting there. So asking the right questions, sharing information, all of those things on a day in and day out basis. It's not enough to communicate once well. You're going to do it on an hourly basis. And sometimes as a producer, you're in a position to know information from above you and to the side and all around the organization. Not all of it is fit to share with your team, because it's confidential or it's just not relevant to what that team. I mean, it may have lots of impact on it, but it just isn't something you can openly discuss. But you can talk about, what the priorities, and you can give context without betraying any, information that shouldn't be shared. So it really is, in leadership positions, it's about how can I share with my team the priorities and the reasons for those priorities without oversharing, so that it makes sense and that we're all on the same page and we're all pulling in the same direction. That's important. People need to understand. They need to know why. They need to know the factors that are in play. And sometimes it's not a satisfying answer, but you just keep saying, just keep talking, just keep reiterating priority and the reasons we're doing it in this order, as much as it's possible, because then the team feels safe. If there's a lot of information that doesn't get shared or passed down or communicated, then you start to there's stuff we don't know, and it's affecting the kind of job that we're doing, and you feel like they don't trust us to tell us something, or there's something they're not telling us. That feeling is, it can make a team fearful and distrustful and kind of freeze up, and then artists don't feel comfortable and confident and safe to do the best job that they can do. And so I think communicating and leadership is about creating that environment where artists feel safe to do their best work. They feel supported. They have everything that they need to do their job: supplies, support, information, and they know that their leadership will tell them when the chips are down. So yeah, you have 3 weeks for this assignment, or I need this assignment tomorrow. And I know that's really unfair, but I will always tell you the truth, or as much of the truth as I am able to share. And if you have that relationship day in and day out, then you all are moving forward together, So I think communication. The other big principle I talk about with my production buddies a lot is anticipation, and anticipating what needs to come next.
Yeah.
Because then, if you're not anticipating, okay, what's in the next hour? What's tomorrow? What's next week? What's the priority for next month? What's the priority for before the end of the year? That kind of context. And that's about communication too, having the information and sharing that information in a timely manner that makes sense to everyone and moves everybody forward together. Anticipation is something you get through experience too. You don't start in a job knowing exactly the steps in a pipeline that come next, or it's 2 weeks out from that thing, we need to start doing this now. That's something that comes from experience. But start to learn. You'll see patterns. Every time we have that thing, 2 weeks ahead or a day ahead or a week ahead, we need, I always get asked to do this to get ready for that thing. And start anticipating it yourself. If the whole team is communicating and seeing patterns and anticipating, the whole machine moves together really well. If people are I'll just do what people ask me to do when they ask me to, without starting to see the patterns and going, she or he always asks me to do this a day ahead. It just makes me want to cry sometimes when people, hey, I know that meeting is next week. I already did that thing you always ask for. Yeah, it's like, oh my Lord, I didn't have to ask for something. That skill of anticipation, little things and big things, is so key for production and to keep things moving forward. And it's so beautiful when it happens.
Well, and talk a little bit about that's a wonderful point. That's got to change from the forum that you're working in. I mean, that anticipation is going to be very different on a stop motion project than it is going to be on a documentary project. Talk a little bit about how you would apply that in each type of circumstance.
I think that comes down to planning and big picture planning. So if you're the producer, you're planning the entire movie, so you're getting even if you're not an expert in post-production or stop motion or whatever the role is, you are sitting with your team members who are experts in those things and putting a big picture schedule together that makes sense, that has milestones that are in the right order, and they lead to the outcome, finished movie, in the time period that you have. And then each of the production roles and artistic supervision roles that break up into departments and areas of expertise, take those big picture milestones and break them down into month milestones, week milestones, daily milestones, so that there is a plan in place. Now, every well-laid plan is a living document.
Contingencies and alternatives here.
Yeah, and things change every day. I gotta fly. I'm not just wave wild gestures.
Points here with it too.
Yeah. Sorry about that. But best laid plans are meant to change, and priorities change every day, and the way a certain scene or the development of a character or a model or a rig happens start to ripple effect through your schedule. And so you're constantly, and budget, by the way, and so you're constantly adjusting those things to accommodate that. And what's great about working in features, TV is a little bit more strenuous because the deadlines are faster and the budgets are smaller, and there's air dates. Yikes. About a movie is that you have all this resource of time and budget and people and talent to move around in response to what's happening on the show now. So that role didn't get cast in the month that we hoped it would. So that means those shots aren't going to go into production as soon as we thought. So let's move up other shots that have characters that are cast and we do have the voice recordings for, or we know we will. All of that constant moving of the Rubik's Cube, the schedule and budget Rubik's Cube. And you have time to react, but not if you don't have a plan in place. If there's no plan, then you're just like throwing resources into the void, hoping that it'll all come out in 2.5 to 3 years. Well, but if there's a plan, you can see where that plan is starting to change shape, and then respond accordingly, and then replace that thing with that thing. And then it does come out. It does come out in the end.
Therein is the trick, juggling it all to keep it all on track to come out even in the end.
Yeah.
And again, the adaptability, your ability to keep the big picture. Talk a little bit about the challenges with juggling big picture versus the minutia of the details of what has to happen along the way.
Yeah, and that's where the team building comes in too. No one person can keep the biggest picture and the smallest minutia in their mind at one time. And that's where trusting your team. So the expert in editorial, needs to own editorial, and you need to trust them to own editorial. The expert in the animation department or in, modeling and rigging, all of those team members, they have a pride in their work, and they should be trusted to do their role and to contribute. That's so beautiful about filmmaking in general, but animation in particular, is that the movie gets better the more departments it goes through. It's just constantly plussed in ways you can't ever anticipate until, the beautiful shots come out at the end of the pipeline. And you're just like, I knew this was going to be good, but that's if the experts in their departments have been trusted to contribute and to plus that they're part of the pipeline. If they aren't allowed to do their job and it's a little more micromanaged and like, I just want what I want, like I don't want you to I want you to do just what's in the boards, or I want you to do just what's in the layout, or please don't change that. You know, sometimes that's necessary for the storytelling, and that's where you trust your director's vision to know what they want, and to, you know, we're here to make sure that that director's vision is realized. But on the other side of that is the director's trust of his team and allowing them to do the job that they're in place to do. No one person can have all the big picture and all the minutia in their head at once, and so everybody doing their role is additive and important, and makes a better movie.
Strikes me that that's true both in giant behemoth productions where you've got hundreds and hundreds of talents and
Yes.
key production roles, as well as in small intimate productions where you're wearing many more hats and a much more nimble, tinier crew.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each of those scenarios as a producer.
Yeah, I mean, the big shows are tough. It does take you trusting the people who are in place in those roles in every department to carry the work, you know, pull the work into their department, encourage it in, and push it out. You just, one person cannot make that happen on their own. It really has to be the whole machine working together. You know, you can do as much troubleshooting as you can meet with everybody every week, but you can't do it for them. They have got to do their role. On the smaller projects, it's exciting and fun, and also, you know, terrifying, because, you know, if you don't do it, you know, you or your tiny team don't do it, it won't get done. But it's also really, there's something invigorating about that. You know, and you can move a little bit quicker because there's fewer people. So as long as you have the right skills on the team, you know, skill sets on the team, or can hire, you know, freelance where needed, you really can move very quickly. And like you said, nimble is a good word. And it's really exciting and fun. And I love both. There's no substitute for the big, all bells and whistles animated feature. I mean, that is a thing of beauty that I am in love with. And I love having roles on those movies and being a part of them. But it's also fun to do. I think there's a place for all sizes of work teams and projects. I do find that in the feature animation industry, it became sort of every movie had to be a box office smash, you know, like $1 billion worldwide. And I wish that there was a little bit more room for the smaller, you know, more a smaller movie in the big corporate animation studios, where you could make a little movie. You could make a Dumbo, or like Lilo and Stitch was such a beautiful movie, and so meaningful, but, you know, just sort of a smaller feeling, you know, a little bit more can take risks artistically and storytelling wise. I think there's a place for tiny, small budget, smaller teams to do more risky filmmaking, kind of a medium range, and then, you know, the huge behemoth, you know, bells and whistles movies as well. I think it's exciting to think about with online and all the studios who are looking for content these days, having a place for all sizes of projects. And
we're seeing such a large group of independent studios that are and independent artists now through Kickstarter and other kind of avenues, getting the funding or finding the funding. Other outlets and streaming services, of course, are looking for those kinds of things. And but you mentioned too, working with such wonderfully rich established content has its own rewards, but there has to be challenges too, because there are certain expectations, there are certain anticipations about, well, it has to be on a certain level. I mean, what kind of pressure? Talk about that pressure to meet, you know, Dr. Seuss. That's ingrained in us as for generations, and we've all grown up with those stories, and yet there's almost such a responsibility with that.
Yeah, that is one of, if I think about it, it's a little bit paralyzing. Thanks, Mindy. No. Yeah, because I grew up loving,
Yeah, creative
yeah, these things.
challenges. Yeah.
And I mean, worshiping the Looney Tunes cartoons that Chuck Jones did and Mike Maltese, and like these people who made things that, how are those people so funny? Like how did they do that? How did they draw so funny and write so funny? And the voices are just brilliant. And the music is insanely brilliant. And it all comes together. You do feel like this new work is going to be held up next to that. And it's a huge responsibility, especially if you grew up loving it and knowing it, and wanting to make sure that the work we do is just as good, and relevant for, it can't just be a throwback retro thing. It's got to be relevant for kids and families today, as well as fans who love the vintage material as well, like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility. Again, the only way through it is to take one day at a time and
Yeah.
just make sure that we are doing the best work we can do every day, one day at a time. And we'll get there. It gets better as you chip away at it, and as you keep working it, keep polishing it, keep honing it, keep losing the stuff that doesn't work. And
I would think, though, as an artist coming in, I mean, how exciting to be working on these characters, but there is a reverence there.
yeah,
Big shoes to fill. How do you push past that? How do you sort of shake that off to find, or do you shake it off? Do you keep that ever present in everybody's mind?
it's ever present, but it's also joyful because we love these characters. We grew up with them, and we have such a love for them that being with them every day is joyful, is fun. And we have such a talented group of people who care so deeply about them, and that stewardship, but also just their own personal enjoyment. So I would say we're amongst the harshest, audience for this new work, as well as the people that are going to see the movies. So we may never be satisfied with it, because we're always going to be pushing and wanting it to be better. But you can only do what you can do, and just keep doing the best work that you can do, and speaking up when it's not good enough, and putting as much of your heart and soul into it as you can. Which, in the animation industry, that's one of the reasons I love doing it, is people do it for the love of it, and that shows through in the work.
I agree. There's something really extraordinary about getting to introduce these timeless characters to new generations.
Yeah.
So brava.
But it is scary. Yeah, it's also
we have these gems in great hands, which is really exciting. I see we have a couple of questions, Matt. Let's jump in. I want to make sure we get to our with our live stream format here. So Matt, if you want to go ahead and.
Yeah, so our first question, I want to get to our first question from the audience, which is asking, what were some things you encountered producing films in collaboration with non-filmmakers who may not understand the process / the medium?
Yeah, that's a good question. You definitely have those people that you're working with that are non-filmmakers. And there's a process of education that happens there. So often we'll just bring those people in more, and just let them in the door. And as most of this audience probably knows, because they work in animation studios are magical places. And if you haven't been into one, if you are new to that world, getting a tour and getting to see behind the scenes is awe-inspiring. And I would say for most of my career, that bringing those people through, really showing them, introducing them to the individual artists who are bringing this world and characters to life, they've never seen anything like it, and we do it. There's plenty of people at the live action side of big major studios who work in movies. They work on live action movies all the time. But to see behind the scenes of an animated movie and of all the hands-on work that goes into creating each character and each scene and each set piece, it's awe-inspiring. And they always come out just, I knew it was work. I can't believe that this is what you guys do. You guys are so talented. It's universally, no one ever goes, meh, that was okay. They always come out awestruck, and then you feel like you have a foothold with people to talk to them about the challenges of making the film and what things you would love to do to make it even better, and use them as partners now that they've seen behind the scenes. But really, the only way is to let them in, make them part of the family, let them see behind the scenes. It's a powerful tool because it's rare and it's special.
Well, and that's one of the things I love about this industry is that people love what they do, and when that's the case, they want to talk about what they do and they want to share it. And
Yeah.
for students and actually anyone at any age or aspect of their career, you want, look what I'm working on, come see, isn't that great? I'm flipping drawing, whatever it is, to sort of showcase the work. As artists, we love that. We do it, that's one thing to stay huddled up in your world and honing your craft, but if it doesn't get out there, if it isn't seen or read or heard, it kind of, what's the point? And so more people can get exposed to that. I think that's a great response. More questions, Matt?
All right, so this next question is asking, do you think more short films will be supplementary to feature releases?
I hope so. Every studio I've ever been at, that's been a goal, we talk constantly about starting a shorts program if we don't already have one. It's tough because just getting the movies, prepared, greenlit, and produced is a Herculean task. But there is something so important about the short form, giving people in the studio a chance to do the next role, a story artist to direct, an animator to direct, a production person to produce. That it really does build a culture and a place to advance within a studio. So once the studio is robust enough to handle that, as well as getting the features off the ground itself, that really is important. I mean, at Warner Brothers, there is our sister division, but is Warner Brothers Animation, that does all the short form, and they do everything from the Cartoon Network shows that you see on Saturday morning to Green Eggs and Ham that is on Netflix, so all of which is just a huge abundant amount of short form, which is its own world. And I think Warner Brothers has a real robust short form world in Warner Brothers Animation. The feature animation right now, we're just focused on getting our features up and running, but I would hope that someday that we would do shorts as well to supplement the features. And I always think it's cool. And I've worked on a bunch of them inside of studios and independently. And they're always great. And I love watching them.
A great way to kind of advance the skills and talents and keep exploring ideas and showcasing new talent.
Yeah, a good place to find new talent as well.
Yeah, and going even back historically, it's a large part of what the bread and butter for early Disney studios and many other studios. It was certainly our viewing experiences have changed, but it really was a good feeder system to sort of get a sense of what individuals were ready for next. And think there's still a
Absolutely.
need for that. And there are great stories that are told in the short format that, you know, we have a lovely, much wider buffet of offerings than
I agree. And yeah, and looks and experimental type.
styles and yeah, technology. Even that was always the road test at Disney, was to test, you know, even xerography as that was applied to animation, which seems a little ancient, but that was first road tested in a short.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to kind of step into the waters. Matt, I'm seeing a few more questions. I want to make sure we get to these.
Yeah, the next question is asking, what are some good practices to setting a productive production schedule?
Okay. That is such a great question. The first thing to do is to figure out the pipeline. So what are all the steps between starting and being finished that you need to hit along the way? And then once you know all of the steps, then figuring out the durations for each step. And duration has to do also with head count. So how many people are you have on that task, as well as the amount of time? Because if you add people, you can shorten the amount of time. But you also look at what the ramifications are for the budget for having a bigger crew as opposed to a smaller crew. So those, and then anticipating, which is hard to do because like anticipating where things are going to go wrong. So again, that's something that comes from experience, but if you don't have direct experience, go to the experts. So if you're working on the pre-production portion, go to department heads, creative department heads who have done that department before, and pick their brain, you know, informationally about how long does it take to do that? What are the things that can go wrong? If you need a little extra time, where does that usually happen and how long do you need? And, you know, you can start your schedule with all of those time pads in, and then you might end up with a, you know, that's a 10-year movie. That's not going to work. But then figure out what you need, you can trim out to fit it in your window. But don't worry about being fat when you start, because you know your schedule is going to be fat and your budget's going to be fat, and then you get the expert opinions about where you can trim, where it's safe to trim, and then don't and then I always leave a little bit of bucket of time in a few places that I know, hey, everything went perfect in story, so I know I can move those buckets of time to modeling or rigging where, you know, I may need more time. Also, think about the specifics of the project. If it's a project with a lot of water, you know, or huge crowd scenes, you know, or this animation wants to be extremely cartoony, which is almost harder these days than doing realistic animation. You know, there's going to be a lot of squash and stretch in the body and the face. Then you know that you need more time for rigging and for testing the rigs with animators to make sure that it's going to be able to do what you want it to do. So you really do need to think about the specifics of this project, where you have things that are easier and where you have things that are harder. And you may know some of that through experience, but go to the source, you know, talk to the experts, you know, in those departments and pick their brains. And then another thing, always partner with your production accountant. The production accountant has access to many past movies that have been scheduled and budgeted, and they will also be able to tell you, you don't have enough time in post-production here, or you don't have enough time in your schedule for this. They're a wealth of information because they see so many different projects and really the final product and what actually happened, you know, not just the plan, but the actuals of what happened on the project. So production accountants and finance folks are a great resource too to double check your assumptions. I hope that was helpful.
Very good points. Yes, be on very good terms with your production accountant.
Oh, lawyers and accountants are your best friends. Be friends with the lawyers and the accountants. They were super helpful. They will always, those relationships always serve, and they know so much more, way more than a producer knows.
We've talked about relationships down the pipeline, but what about working up in executives? Let's talk a little bit about that. And if you are in a studio situation or in an independent situation, what are the higher up relationships that are really key to properly maintaining?
Mm-hmm. I think that it's the same principles, just handled in a different way. So communication is key, making sure that you're communicating up very well, being prepared, knowing what the plan needs to be and why, being able to explain and educate where necessary on but that's about being prepared, like being able to explain why there's this much time in the schedule for that, or this much money in the budget for that. Being over prepared for presentations, whether it's about a schedule or a budget or creatively what the project is about, a green light presentation. And then and being over prepared means practicing, before you get to that meeting with the executive. Show as many people as you can, show your boss, show your boss's boss, bring in the person who does your job on the next movie. Can you look at this with me? What did you put in your budget and schedule? Can you, those friends and family screenings or friends and family audiences for pitches or screenings that give you their feedback as a peer is really important before you get to your executive. I'm partnered with a wonderful creative director right now in development at Warner Brothers, David James. Special shout out to Mr. David James. And he always says, you want the presentation with executives to be like going to the DMV. You already know all the answers. It isn't like you're winging it, You're not trying to find the answer in the room. You know what questions they're going to ask. You know how to answer all those questions. And that just takes preparation and trying to anticipate and practicing with as many partners as you can to get their feedback so that you feel like you have all your bases covered.
Good points. Very good points. And as your team, talk a little bit about the importance of your peripheral team on your producerial level of your accountant and your more direct immediates. What oftentimes when you're coming into a studio situation, it may already be in place, or you're able to sort of shape that team as well. Talk about those differences and where you've had to adapt.
Oh yeah, there's both things. There's people in place. There's people that get assigned to you as like, this is your person that you had nothing to do with the hiring. And then there's also positions that you hire for and can build your own team. There's both things. And embrace all of it. There is no advantage to fighting someone who gets assigned to you. Embrace, make them part of your team. 100%. Make it work. Go the extra 110% it might take to embrace that team member. It's way more painful and detrimental to everyone to fight something like that. It is what it is. To quote our president, sorry. Sometimes it is what it is, and studio structures are what they are. And there are some roles, lawyers and finance people, who are institutional to the studio, and the production teams don't have a say over those people. So make best friends with them, and they are wonderful, and they are really key partners. I couldn't do my job without them. So make them key partners, keep them in the loop, be overly generous with your time and your information. And the other thing I have found is avoid being defensive. there's a lot of times when you get questioned on something that you feel like, this is my area of expertise. I know this really, really well. I've done this for, 28 years. I kind of think I'm the expert and you're not. Don't allow yourself to take that stance with people who are really your team members on the studio level. Take the stance of listening, of hearing out what they need. They have their jobs. They have people coming to them on the studio side that you'll never know what those relationships are like and what kind of grilling they get, about the material you hand over to them. So just be as generous and helpful and be as good a partner to those people as possible. It will get reflected back to you. But the other stance, just being defensive and offended when your judgment is questioned, or those things, it doesn't pay off. It doesn't make relationships where you trust each other and have each other's back, and that's what you want. Especially with people that get assigned to you from the studio side.
Good advice. More questions here, Matt. Let's make sure we get these.
Yeah, our next question here is asking, what kind of educational resources would you recommend to someone who would like to transition from live action into animation production management to learn about the pipeline and the process?
Oh, it's such a good question. I am working with someone who is coming into animation as a first-time animation person from another very creative industry. And some of the things I've recommended to them is watch this fantastic documentary called Wake and Sleeping Beauty. It's
on that one for sure.
Yeah, that's a great introduction. Also, Don Hahn also made a documentary that came out this year called Howard, which delves into Howard Ashman's story, who was a genius Broadway lyricist who, came to feature animation and worked on Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and amazing movies. So he transitioned. And so those two documentaries really are a good primer for the big picture of what it's like to work in animation, what the pipeline is, who the people are, what it feels like. And especially from somebody coming in from the outside, it's good peek behind the curtain. Don Hahn, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit of a Don Hahn file because I worked for him for so long, but he also wrote a great book about the process of animation called The Alchemy of Animation. And it covers, it's a very top line, but it covers the basics about traditional 2D animation, CG animation, and stop motion. It's another great place to go. Uses a lot of visual reference from movies we all know and love, and talks about what you're seeing. So that's another really good primer. And then there are amazing classes that can be taken through the Animation Union in Burbank. If you want to get more into like learning the skills of particular roles in the departments of animation, if you're an artist. Those are,
CTN Expo is a great experience to sit in on those workshops. More of these kinds of things. This is exactly the forum we've shaped so that we can offer more insight into the creative side, the technical side, the daily processes of this industry, and how it's changing and growing. And keep going. You've got so many other, just watching films, I think too would be.
Yeah, watching films. But you're right, Mindy. I think online, especially now, there are so many online classes and online panels and workshops that can get you the overview of the animation process and then lead you specifically to the things you're interested in. So I want production management, then you can search online for those things like this panel today, or I want to become an animator, or I want to paint backgrounds, or I want to model characters in CG. Whatever those specifics are, it's all available. And you just need to kind of start big picture, and then you can hone in your interest as you start to think. I think that's the role I would like to have in animation, and make your way towards it.
Mhm.
It's a long road. It's not a short one. I started as a PA, and it's taken me 20 years to get to the associate producer role, and I've been a producer for about eight years. I'm not counting, might be a little longer than that. It's a long road. It's not short, but I have loved it. I've met amazing people along the way, and gotten to work on movies I'm proud of. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful thing to do.
Yeah. And I think one of the really kind of overarching things to keep in mind, that one of the key differences, and it's been stated, Dawn talks about this a lot, Bonnie Arnold, you as well, about it, the difference really is live action is more of a sprint in terms of production, and animation is more of a marathon. So I think having that awareness going into it is key, that it's not going to happen at the pace or necessarily in the approach that you might be familiar with in live action. So getting a handle on those key initial differences is helpful from the start, and then doing, to your great suggestion, a deeper dive into so many great resources out there to pinpoint where you want to start plugging in. So it's a great, and welcome aboard, because it's, once you find the world of animation,
We'll never go back.
right.
It's a good group of people.
Yeah, it is. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm happily landed where I did in this realm.
Me too.
Matt, I'm seeing we've got another question or so. I want to make sure we get those all in. These are great.
Yeah, the next question is asking, what should aspiring producers spend their time on while they wait to be hired in a production management role with a studio?
Well, for my path, I started at the bottom of the rung. So I started as a PA, and you will, if you start as a PA and work your way up, you will be busy all the way along the line. So, and you will learn from your peers, from your team members. So I came up with other PAs and coordinators and supervisors that I learned from. They taught me on the job. I did not go to school for film or production management or anything like that. I was an oil painter in school, like, very strange. So I learned everything, like literally everything on the job. And I am a huge proponent of that. Like I say, it's a long road, but there is no waiting. Once you get that PA job, it is busy. It is a full, 60-hour plus week sometimes of learning on the job. And it's wonderful. You meet great people, you work on meaningful projects. And yeah, it's a lot of paying dues if you want to look at it that way, but it's also a fantastic way to spend your time. I find it rewarding. Feature animated films bring a lot of good into the world. It is a worthy thing to spend your time on. So I don't think there's a quick answer, and I wouldn't wait. Yes, you can, all these resources, you can read these books and watch these documentaries, and it'll give you a little bit of context, but there's no substitute for just getting into the role, even if it's right at the bottom, and working your way up. That's what I did. If you're coming from another industry that has similar skill sets, you might be able to be hired as a coordinator or a supervisor. I have seen that happen. So you're not starting at the very bottom and working your way up. So it's possible to do that. I took about 4 or 5 years and worked in interactive games, because it was the 90s and that's what everybody was doing. That's what all my friends were doing. And I loved games. I loved interactive games and playing them. So I thought it would be cool to work in it. And so I spent about 5 years doing that. And I became a producer in games early on in my career. And then it's a very volatile industry. And I decided I really want to work on movies. My heart is in creating, the artwork for an animated feature film. That's what I really want to do. And I had to take several steps back. I went from being a producer in interactive games, kind of this Wild West industry, to being an assistant production manager. So that's, associate producer, production manager, assistant production manager. That's 3 steps back. And at first it felt kind of bad, but once I got into the job, it was exactly the right level for me. And it was at Disney Feature Animation, so I felt like I was learning from, people who did it the best in the, one of the best in the world. Now there are many studios that you could do this at, but at that time it was one of the few. And I didn't regret having to take those steps back at all, but I didn't have to go all the way back to PA. I did that in TV.
Well, in terms of, you said at that time you had stepped into what was sort of on the cutting edge gaming.
Yeah.
Where do you see the industry going today, now as we have AI and VR and the other alphabet soup out there? Are these worlds going to collide or combine or adapt together? And where do you see it going?
Well, it's interesting. I think with movies and television and games being online, the delivery of this media is all getting more and more similar.
Mm-hmm.
And then even in the early 90s and mid 90s, when I was working in television and games, the actual production work that I was doing was the same as feature animation. It didn't have the same budget and time to do character design and world design, but it was character design and world build just like I do now. It just had smaller time frames and different kinds of budgets. And then in games, you have to deal with the whole programming side. And so you produce these gorgeous assets that then get kind of squashed into whatever, the engine that can play that back. And a lot of times the quality gets degraded because it needs to play back in real time with the decisions that the player, the users are making. And so, you're like, oh, and that's part of the reason I really wanted to work in feature animation is I wanted to develop these characters and worlds and see them in all their glory. And feature film is that place. So it's the right place for me, but I do feel like it's the same kinds of work. It just, I just wasn't interested in the programming side, and I wasn't doing it. There were brilliant programmers I was working with, but the having to fit into those different engines and having the game engines change every year and the volatility of it was less interesting to me. And also seeing the beautiful artwork that we were producing getting squashed into whatever the engine could handle was a little bit demoralizing. So I like sitting in a dark theater and watching a big, gorgeous artwork up on a big screen with everybody and laughing and crying with a big audience. That's what is satisfying to me. Whether we will ever do that again, I don't know, but I do think online is sort of making the delivery engine of all of this media more similar.
And what about virtual reality and adding a third dimension to this beautiful art?
It's a head scratcher for me. I have seen all the demos. I've been at every major studio where the VR folks come in with the headsets and we all bump into walls while we're trying to use it. And I've seen beautiful work done. There's been some gorgeous filmmaking of little short form pieces that have been in total VR, and they're astounding and gorgeous to me. There is a future there that will get more and more seamless. It's still really clunky, and I'm not sure I understand. My heart isn't in it. It doesn't make me excited. So the work I see is gorgeous, and I'm like, I wish that was a movie or a TV show and not a VR experience. It's not my thing, but I think there will be a day in the future where where that interface will be so seamless that it'll be the thing that we all do. But I don't know, maybe I'm a little old fashioned. It doesn't make sense to me yet. I can't wrap my brain around it. It makes my head hurt.
So much that we focus on now in the immediate world that we have, and how technology has advanced our known creative outlets is pretty exciting. And navigating that is no easy challenge. But at the heart of it, what is it still? You spoke a little bit about it, but what is it still that keeps you coming back to what you do? What's the germ, the kernel, the essence of why you do what you do?
Loving stories told with beautiful artwork. I mean, at my core, you know, I studied art history and studio art in school, and I've always thought of myself as an artist. Just because I haven't ended up doing that as a job, I've been more of a production manager. What makes the day-to-day rewarding for me is the art and working with the artists. And then the extra bonus on top of that, the actual magic of it, is that this artwork becomes a moving story, which, you know, I've always loved movies as well. And that you can sit in the theater and be transported to this other place and feel like you've met real people, you know, or real characters, and lived a story that you could never live in real life. It's just sheer magic to me. So it's sort of like this bonus of loving art and artwork and beautiful artwork and movies together became, you know, I had no idea that this was a job, you know. Is that even a thing? You know, and to be able to be a part of it and support that is just astounding to me. I always pinch myself. It's like just kind of magical and great. So very grateful for it.
Well, it speaks volumes that, you know, I've had so many people say, oh, don't you lose the magic if you know too much about it? You see too much the curtain. And that is what I think is so extraordinary, is that the more you learn about it, the more you experience it, the more you swim in the waters of this world, the more you want to get into it. And the magic is still there. And
Yeah.
it speaks volumes. And I think also illustrates a great aspect of you as a terrific producer, is that you can still get lost in the magic and suspend your disbelief and go in there and fall in love and cry and laugh with these amazing worlds that are created.
Yeah, and what makes it the day-to-day so fun is, you know, we can see, you know, in every meeting we can review something someone has done. Like they have this assignment to design a character or paint a painting, and every little piece that we see on a daily basis, you know, I can see like what part that will play in this final movie. And I get it. So it's so exciting because the magic is in that tiny first little glimmer of a really rough story sketch, or a really rough idea of this character might be like this. You know, if she looks like this, does that communicate who she is? Is it better if she's like this? Like all those little tiny pieces that we see day in and day out, you know, in meetings. It gets very exciting because it's, you know, it just the final product becomes revealed in these tiny little steps, and it just keeps you going. It's because you're like, oh, I can see it. This is gonna be so good. It's very exciting. Yeah, you know, don't work in animation if you don't love it, because the love of it is what will keep you going through all the hard stuff and the long days and the disappointing times. But yeah, it's, oh my gosh, yeah, every day is exciting.
Well, and that's that adaptability. In your journey, this marathon journey of yours, what's next? What's ahead on the horizon? Where do you see yourself adapting to in the coming years?
Well, it's an exciting world out there right now. There's the whole world, the animation industry is the world industry. You know, every country is involved, and there are artists, amazing artists coming from every corner of the world. So I think my heart is still in movies, animated movies. I like all the forms. I would love to. Uh, I'm working in development now, but I could see myself falling in love with one of these projects and taking it through to completion. I don't know if that would be a CG animated film. I would love to work on a 2D animated film. I would love to work on another stop motion film. All of the above. I'm just, I love what I'm doing, but I think the possibilities of what's out there in the industry right now is really exciting. And I'm in the spot I want to be in now, but it's an exciting future. The world is, people want animated features, and I mean, isn't that a miracle? That's great. We're here to make them.
Yeah, it's amazing. There was a time this was nothing but novelties and silly
Yeah.
things and commercials and other things, but it's really an exciting time and moment, and the level of artistry and talent and vision is unsurpassed. I feel about to enter a new era of animated storytelling. Thank you for joining us today, Connie. You are amazing. Thank you for your great experiences. We look forward to continuing this, and we'll have you back with more adventures.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy. This was a joy, and anytime.
You're the best. Take good care, everyone. Be safe. Go out and vote. And we will see you in the next Primary Sources.